Bruce Springsteen, Bruce Springsteen, Bruce Springsteen. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Warui Deshou. second stream, the patron timed exclusive, as they say in Of a Video Game Biz podcast, for you all, where we talk about Odd Taxi, the oddest of taxis. This is episodes 1 through 4 we're going to be talking about today. I am the freshly shorn subtle doctor, and with me, as usual, is my great friend, the hardest working man in pod business. It is Shadon.
I still refuse to believe that you're the Doc I know.
Nah.
I don't. No, I'm not buying it. I'm absolutely not buying it. I'd be more convinced if you looked like one of the animal people out of Odd Taxi rather than you do now. I don't believe it.
Believe it. Date bio. I'm glad you're getting in the spirit of things, Go in chat. Hi everyone who's joining us. Shadon, I hope you'll get used to it. Because I have to say I enjoy it. It's still weird to look in the mirror from time to time, but like when I look in the mirror, I'm not displeased. So it'll stay this way for a little while. But the platinum blonde may make a return appearance, sooner than you think, out of the blue.
Does Doc's wife suspect anything?
In what sense? Oh, you mean like me kidnapping him and taking his place? No, she's none the wiser. She's totally bamboozled, fooled, hoodwinked. It's in the bag.
I couldn't have asked for a better response to that.
Yes. I've assumed his identity with little trouble.
Well, next week I'll actually have hair, folks. I mean, if everyone's doing a makeover at this point, I'm just going to come up with a toupee. Why not at this point?
That would rule. I'm sorry, that would just fucking rule.
It's gonna be there like this with a comb, just casually, and then
I know, just like pretend.
Have you lost weight, Shadon?
Nothing is right. Pretend like nothing is wrong. I'm just like,
nope, exactly.
Nope, I feel the same. Same old.
You know what is wrong though? The fact that I did not watch Odd Taxi while it was airing, it just kind of flew me by. And now I look back and I've said this many times before on the podcast, I feel like I'm going to start making like a debt book, or a long list of IOUs of it, me wanting to slap my younger self from like a couple of months back. You're like, why are you not watching this? Why are you not watching this, you moron?
I know. I just hold my hands out. I mean, I missed it. I think I mentioned maybe we were doing something, maybe it was last week, when I said, hey, it didn't really catch fire out of the gate. It was like a cult hit that built up steam. But man, after watching it, actually, I'm kind of glad that I didn't watch it while it was airing, because I feel like the wait would be excruciating. Shadon, I find this show incredibly addictive. Like, I want to go home and watch the rest of it. There's no guarantee I'm going to keep myself on the schedule that we have to cover it. Like, I probably will watch ahead. I'll try to fight the impulse, but man,
it's tough.
It's tough. Such a good show. I would want to see more.
And that comment from yours, like in the, it was like only a cult hit at the start. I just have to assume that's just because people hadn't seen it, because it's not the case of like where we've talked about other shows in the past where the first couple of episodes are kind of whatever and then they get better as they go along. Looking at you, Tomazaki, for example. This is like magnificent right out of the gate. Yes. The first episode alone is practically flawless in my opinion.
Killer.
Absolutely killer. So I am a bit surprised that it didn't receive the attention it deserved. But then again, how true is that of how many things have we talked about in the past that were not given like the mass appeal that they should have? But that being said, Odd Taxi, I'll say this right now, definitely seems like a show that was created for the express purpose of telling a good story, first and foremost, rather than, trying to go for mass appeal. And I'm entirely okay with that. We seem to get less and less of that as opposed to the latter over time, So when we get gems like this, which are very much their own thing and unapologetically their own thing as well, I am completely on board for that. Although I will say this, I am not entirely unconvinced that this is not, a tribute or a homage in some respect to Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, and that is not simply because of the mode of transportation. But I'm sorry, but when your two lead characters are both suffering from insomnia or lack of sleep, and there is also, I should point out, a mystery or a plot line revolving around an absent, kidnapped, missing young girl. Well, let's just hope that there are no politicians trying to get elected in this show that we meet later on.
Oh boy. Just yeah, I hope. I really can't see this as like some kind of homage or like send up to Taxi Drive. To me, it feels a lot more like a Coen Brothers movie because there's so many moving parts that are interweaving with each other and character stories like that are colliding in these really like specific and highly improbable ways, and like it just makes me think that it's all going to lead up to some ridiculous scene at the end where like I don't know, everyone's chasing each other in an airport, you know, or something. Like it's going to be like the eraser will end up being like the crux of everything.
Odokawa upgrades to an 8-seater minibus, and all of the people are suddenly on it at the same time inexplicably.
Yes. That one.
I'm telling you, it's an airport run, as you say. That it's got to end like that. Everyone loves the airport run.
It's a great scene. It's a great thing to do in a film. And I mean, regarding well, I actually don't know like the hard data. I mean, maybe it's the most popular show on Crunchyroll. I mean, somehow I doubt it. Like, I guess the buzz-o-meter not being like, not having Odd Taxi at the top. I mean, Gogo said it in chat that like there were some really big shows last season, and this is a show from spring 2021, so just ended recently. But like, I think people are really looking forward to like Dynazenon, and there were a whole bunch of other like sequels that, I mean, wasn't there like a slime show starting? As well? I mean, there's
the second season of Reincarnated of the Slime. I think so. Maybe I'd never paid attention to that show.
It seems like not. I mean, I don't think I'm not here to like diss it. It just I haven't watched it either.
It's a good isekai apparently, which congratulations to clear the lowest of bars indeed.
The Dodo isekai.
We'll get back to Dodo soon enough. Don't you worry.
That's So the like, but also like the premise. You know what I mean? Like, it just sounds unspectacular, and there's no waifus, and I mean, there's just like a lot of kind of maybe things that premiere week, like Odd Taxi, just didn't jump out at people, and so it's relatively unsurprising to me. And I don't think the manga was like a huge thing like Beastars was, just to reference another show about anthropomorphic animals. So yeah, Yuki in chat, I guess, is talking about slime reincarnation. It had 16 episodes straight in which they did nothing but talk. Okay, not unlike Odd Taxi then, which feels like just
fair enough.
Is a very dialogue heavy show.
I mean, between us both now, Doc, I think we've watched enough, enough anthropomorphic animal anime, animal may, whatever you want to call it. We'll come up with the proper term for it at the time. That we could probably start putting it into their own tier list. And I mean, me telling you that Odd Taxi is better than Brand New Animal, one of the worst things I've watched for the podcast by far. That should come as no surprise to any of you. I mean, it could literally have just been footage of Odomaku just driving around town with a mellow tune playing and no actual dialogue, and it would have been better. Literally nothing could have happened, and it would have not been as bad as Brand New Animal. But I'm actually kind of stunned at this point to think it could very well end up being much better than Beastars, a show that I have a lot of reference for.
It could do.
That's actually kind of shocking to me, but I'm all in for it. I want to see where it goes.
Yeah, it's like a different thing. It's really different than that to me. Like, hard one, because I loved Beastars first season. And I'm really looking forward to sitting down with season 2 now that it's out of Netflix jail. Yuki in chat says Odd Taxi is an anime original. ANN has the manga beginning in January, so it seems like it's either like being like produced at the same time or slightly predates it. I don't really know, but that does the fact that it, you know, the claim that it's anime original jibes with, like I was reading an interview with the director and he was saying there was a question about deciding whether or not the cast would be anthropomorphic animals, and I'm like, wait a minute. if this is an adaptation, like surely that's not something you would just say, you would just do it, right? So like maybe it is, and the manga is adapting that story, or they're coming out at the same time. I'm not really sure. I have to do more digging. But again, according to A&M, so the Odd Taxi anime began airing April 28, 2020, or no, a few weeks before that. It's got episode 4 airing in April 28. So the beginning of April 2021. And it's got the Odd Taxi manga, parentheses adaptation. So I guess it's maybe the latter one, but it has the vintage of that being January 15th, 2021. So predating the airing of the anime by 3 months. Could be some wrong information there, or, you know, who knows what's leeching off what in terms of the production and all of that stuff. But yeah, I'll look into it more. What? Wait a minute. Hold the phone. Otokawa has the same seiyuu as Tanjiro from Demon Slayer.
Well, you mentioned separately that they were also the seiyuu who played 9S in Nier Automata. And I'm just going to throw this out here right now. I can see like the person who played 9S in Nier Automata, or Nier Automata, I pronounce it, doing Tanjiro. That makes sense to me in terms of like what the actor's done before. But I would never have expected them to then do a disaffected, grumpy, somewhat antisocial, sleep-deprived taxi driver and do it this well. Yeah, kudos to Hanai Natsuki, as Yukidon provides us helpfully in chat there. For that range. Not what I expected, but I'm glad that they're getting like outside of the wheelhouse that seems to have been set for them. Because I mean, when you're making that Demon Slayer money, you could be set for life doing, you know, shonen protagonists with swords at this point. Like, but he's just like, but then again, maybe that's why he can now afford to do something like Odd Taxi, which is more low key. Like, yeah, you know, it's like when Adam Driver, you know, did you know, the Star Wars films, which whatever you want to call about them, and then did Marriage Story. You know, it's like Red Letter Media made a joke about that, where they were like, you know, that pays Star Wars pays for his mansion, that film pays for his coffee. But it's true, you know, like gets to do something more artful and interesting than the usual fare that they're stuck with. Totally. And if you want my very quick thoughts on Demon Slayer, I never finished it because I got bored of it, and that's all I really have to say about it. I don't see the appeal.
So wrong. I'm watching it right now, very late to the party on this, but
yeah,
I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the best battle shonen to come out in a while. I mean, it's up there.
It looks great.
It's up there with and not just the look, but the story and the characters and everything. The fights, like it's all it really gels together nicely for me. I mean, as a genre piece, I mean, again, I think it's like just as good as anything that has come down the pike lately in that very specific slice of shonen.
I mean, you get to see where all of UFO tables at tax evasion money went, and it certainly went straight onto the animation as opposed to into the taxman's account, as it should have done. Whoops.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
just
comment on that. As the PR man for Demon Slayer, I can provide you no comment on Ufotable's tax monies and their alleged non-payments, etc.
Well, it's okay. I know that you're actually just a doppelganger for Doc, so I know full well that he probably would have a different opinion if you were here now. But you've replaced him, you body snatching bastard. I know it. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, all I can say is I kind of gave up at the point where Zenitsu was just wandering a forest, like mewling to himself like a wounded kitten, and that was basically the entire episode. And I was just like, nope, I can't take this anymore. I can't take this. This is like listening to someone try to drill through a block of concrete.
You hate that kind of comedy, and I mean, in all fairness, like it's not always a winner for me either. Like it sort of feels like a throwback to like Excel Saga, where and that style of thing where the comedy is like, you know, talk fast and talk loud and scream and like he does that, but like I don't know, for some reason like I find him charming, and it always kind of makes me, it doesn't make me laugh, but it does make me smile. And but I just find Tanjiro to be such an incredible main character.
He's solid. But anyway, so
but
yeah,
not the Demon Slayer podcast.
I will be doing a Demon Slayer podcast. Never finished it. Don't intend to finish it. Moving on. We're to talk about taxis, not trains. Damn it!
That's what I was gonna say. That you're gonna be left behind. You won't make your train to see the greatest movie ever made. According to the box office, anyway. Look, like I said, not the Demon Slayer podcast. There's actually a podcast for that. But this is not the Demon Slayer episode of our podcast. We're here to talk about more modern modes of transport and modern locales, such as Tokyo. And we're here to talk about anthropomorphic taxi drivers and nurses and small-time crooks and the shenanigans they get up to. So let us go ahead then and get into our odd taxi talk. Before I get to talk about some of the creatives that are working on the show, why don't we give our we've hinted at our initial impressions, but why don't we like sum it up, like how you feel about the show so far?
Oh boy, well, I'm actually, there's a certain simplicity to this show, and I think there's like something that can be said about sometimes works of genius are based on very simple premises, which is there's always, I think, in history of fiction, at least as far as the profession has existed, been this kind of romanticized version of the taxi driver in the same way that you get the romanticized version of the bartender. Basically, someone who is sagely and personable, who knows a lot of people, all that sort of stuff. So you're already going off a classic premise here, which is here's a taxi driver. I mean, wasn't there actually a recently released indie game that you actually suggested to me about, where you were playing as a taxi driver trying to solve a mystery? So it's not unheard of.
I'm going to look up the name while you're talking.
Yeah, so we have that already, and that alone is actually not a bad idea for a show in general, which is here's our taxi driver protagonist, and he meets crazy, kooky people, all that. And then even going beyond, that, of course, to films. I've already mentioned Taxi Driver, but then, of course, there are things like, I think it was Collateral with Jamie Foxx and Tom Cruise. Yeah, I mean, there are probably more I could list if I put more thought into it. But point being is it's a classic premise, having a protagonist and a taxi, and all that follows, because it is the window or the door to meeting many, many different people and being involved in, very briefly, their experiences. Even though 99% of the time your experience as a taxi will be mundane, which is fine.
Exactly. And look, that's how I want it. I mean, if I'm honest, like, I've never driven in a taxi proper, but when I call like an Uber or whatever, what I want is as little conversation as possible. Turn on the radio, listen to whatever, like allow me to look at my phone, and I'm good. By the way, the name of the game is NeoCab that I was recommending. There's also in a similar vein, this game came out a little bit late, maybe like 6 months or so after NeoCab, Cloudpunk. I don't think it's as well reviewed, but it's a similar kind of premise where I think that you're a driver. Yeah, you're like a driver in that game. I don't know if you're a taxi person. Maybe you're just a delivery driver. But anyway, that's a different thing. So that's just NeoCab. NeoCab is the game.
So the thing is, though, like that's the baseline classic premise mentioned here. But what they've then done is taken that classic premise and married it to something that is relatively a new phenomenon, at least as we understand it, although by virtue of it being tied into the taxi and also, as it turns out, the radio is not new. But this is, we of course have become more aware of it. It's become much more prevalent in modern times in a way that is blindingly obvious, but only because now they've done it, you know, in a way that is kind of like amazing. And that's why I say like this is kind of like genius from simplicity, which is two things that make perfect sense when brought together. Which is it's also got a very nuanced and well-rounded examination of parasocial relationships. Holy shit!
There's a lot of that
The
in there,
people,
isn't it?
yeah. And it makes perfect sense because, you know, getting in a taxi, that is a parasocial relationship of sorts. But of course, you know, does that, is there ever the possibility it could be more than that? Like, and I'm not talking, of course, romantic necessarily, but I'm talking about, you know, like what's the dividing line between parasocial and regular and all that, you know, there's, I'm not going to go into that right now because I'm saying just going my very TLDR, like, you know, assessment. But the fact that it is that genius from simplicity is amazing. And everything that, like, this show has, it's like like its objectives laid out, which is wants to cover all these different topics, and it does so pretty brilliantly. It's actually also kind of amazing to me that this show is centered around a mystery.
Yep.
There is a mystery to it, which is, of course, I alluded to it before, the you know, this missing young girl. And it is actually the least interesting part of the show thus far, which is kind of stunning. Now, that does not make it bad. It does not make it trivial, nor does it make it superfluous to what is going on. But at the moment, it exists, in my mind at least, as a framework to hang all this other stuff over it. And that's kind of brilliant because lesser shows, they'd only have the mystery to rely on. And yet this show is actually such a victim of its own like writing success that the mystery, well crafted though it is, with all of its little puzzle pieces, is whatever. I could let like I'll get back to it later. I'm cool with it. You can just push that aside for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is so far a pretty fantastic production. I think the dialogue alone is worth the price of admission for this show. It is incredibly entertaining, very well written, and just fascinating. And it comes, it's not quite to the level of like a Monogatari, but like it comes thick and fast, and there's a lot of like clever wordplay, and I mean that I just love it, and the dialogue, like just the things that they're talking about too, is like so refreshing. That these are these not two, but it's a cast full of adults. I mean, like we're so used to like watching high school shows, you know, or if it's not high school, it's a fantastical place with adults. But this is like the real world with adults, with real world problems, and like in a medium that is kind of overcrowded with shows about adolescence for adolescents that, you know, I still enjoy, you know, a great deal. But this is like nice for a change of pace. And as you said, like this is a mystery box kind of a show, right? And there's a lot of different mysteries. There's like so many kind of different questions that you're left with after watching each episode, and I'm going to be really interested to see how everything kind of ties together. And the show's really funny. I mean, it's incredibly funny at times. I thought it was going to lean into the comedy more. It's actually more of like a low key character drama than I anticipated, but the comedy is there, and it's very, very funny. I think the drama's hitting, you know, I think all the characters are coming along quite nicely. You know, I'm really interested in everybody and what they're up to. And yeah, I mean, I think the show is singing as far as the writing goes. I mean, and this is not a show where you're going to have a lot of, I think anyway, super flashy, elaborate animation, you know, no action sequences or anything like that.
They sat down in the car for much of it.
Just a lot of, yes, or like at a bar, a lot of talking. So the characters, the dialogue, the mystery kind of have to carry it, and they're more than holding up their end of the bargain.
Easily.
Yeah, and I mean, I mentioned the Coen brothers, and again, everything is just so tightly bound together. All the paths that these characters are on, the intertwined roads, and man, it's just so fascinating. It's a really, really fascinating show.
Indeed, yeah. I am hard pressed. I mean, we've had like really good starts to shows before that we've covered on our podcasts, but this is definitely up there with some of the strongest stuff I've seen. Like this is awful Wonder Egg quality. This is Isoken quality. Yeah, Decadence. Yeah, this is up there with those, if not possibly even a little bit beyond them. Like it is a potent opening. And there's a lot to talk about over these 4 episodes as well.
I feel like the show is really tapped at like that you specifically would be really in tune with its rhythms. Like the way how kind of tight everything is in terms of writing and all that just really feels like your bag.
Oh, it absolutely is. There's some amazing little bit details, and also inferences one can make. It has things to say. It is also pretty, how do I put this? Like, it pulls no punches with its assessment, in particular, episode 4 of gacha games and their inherently predatory nature.
There's a lot. But I was just gonna say, there's just a lot about technology in this show. More than I was expecting. So much commentary on like contemporary, like 2021, our relationship with technology. What is it? Why is it unhealthy? There's a lot of that in the show.
Yep, absolutely. And even then things like literal masks and then the figurative masks we wear, the idea of persona, all that stuff there. There is some really, really interesting stuff, and I will be talking about that soon. But you're also right in saying it's just an engaging mystery and also just funny in times. Well, like there's the great capoeira joke in episode 3.
that was incredible. Probably my favorite bit of comedy was when I have to look up his name just for everyone's sake. I have a name list pulled up. It's the character who's in the green shirt, Kakihana. Is he like a gibbon? Is he some sort of monkey? He's a primate, right?
With Kakihana, yeah. I would say he's a gibbon. He's some sort of, he's a monkey. He's some sort of...
Yeah. Well, he's like sat down in some public area, fawning over the messages that he's sending to someone on
to
the idol lady on their equivalent of Tinder, their like dating app. And he's sitting in a big chair and suddenly someone sits next to him and starts talking about like the missing girl, and it's like he leaves these pauses and it's like they're having this conversation and they're talking about Otokawa, and he's like knows Otokawa, but then you find out like dude was just like, he pulls out his earpiece because he was talking on the phone. I died. I absolutely died that Kakihana thought they were having this conversation. Best is we get to...
Do you know what's kind of genius and makes me again think that this is also like inspired a little bit by Coen Brothers films or just live action generals? We get to see that scene in reverse later. We get to see the conversation in full or hear it in full, but you see Kakihana in the background, and he is actually at times almost mouthing lines that are being said in the phone. Back, like even though we already know what the conversation was. And I love that it's not just like a one-shot thing, but they repurposed it later for extra humor, but also function as well and getting that across, like, what was being said.
I'm really glad they did
pretty
that.
Ingenious.
Yeah. And they don't do that for every, like, path crossing, which is great. Like, they don't overuse that technique, but I thought it was well used there, and we needed to hear him talking to the thuggish Dobu, that primate. We needed to hear his side of that conversation.
Oh, you mean the monkey who's returning from his guest appearance in Hellboy?
Right, right, that guy. Yes.
Is that a monkey? He's got a gun. That's all I can think of.
It's been too long since I've seen that.
No, it's not. It's a comic strip. It's been memed so many
Mm-hmm.
times, and I legitimately could not take that scene with him seriously just because of that. It was a monkey with a gun, and that's it. That's ruined it forever. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike Mignola.
Good job. but, but
You've
no.
ruined monkeys with guns for me forever.
And my man is just sitting there totally oblivious that Kakihana is like trying to speak with him. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
This is an incredible show. So, all right. I think we've gone on about our general feelings long enough. Let me talk about some creatives. You know, we're not going to get to talk about everyone involved this week, but we'll get back to folks. So quickly, the director for the show is Baku Kinoshita of a company called Pix. It's like an initialization, but I don't really know what for. But Kinoshita is, from his picture, he looks like a pretty young guy, but like, so he works for this company called Pix, which is producing this show along with Oriental Light and Magic, OLM, who, like, I imagine they've done a lot of stuff, but I know them as those people that animate the Pokemans. And say what you want about the Pokemans, but that show looks incredible a lot of the time.
I've seen some good clips from that actually, but now that you said that, all I can think is I wish there were like who's that Pokemon ad breaks where you get to see Dobu like as a silhouette.
Oh,
it's just a silhouette of a gun, yeah, and it just fades. It's like Dobu.
it's Pikachu. No, it's Dobu.
Dobu.
That's just gotta be Gengar. No,
Would he be classed as a fighting type? I think he might be. Yeah.
But no. Kinoshita is like, I think he does like character designs and animation for Pix, and they picked no pun intended
ho ho
him to do the show, to be the director. He doesn't really have any input as far as like the writing goes. That's actually Kazuya Konomoto, who is the head writer and writing all scripts and writing the manga. Which again is why I thought this was an adaptation. I thought Pix and OLM had brung in the mangaka to write, but like apparently again it's going on at roughly the same time. So who knows what is the source material here, the original. But anyway, so Kinoshita is the director, and he's like better known for like working on apparently like doing animation on commercials and things like that. And he wanted to kind of branch out and do some more storytelling and character development. And so he's super happy to be working on Odd Taxi and working with who he considers to be a really good writer in Konomoto. And I want to say that like Kinoshita hasn't directed any other anime. I think that that's right. Again, I think that he's mostly an animator and character designer for Pix.
Wow, that is impressive because again, I just want to restate that scene we talked about before where we see it twice but from different angles. Like that feels pretty inspired to me.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe one can, and the thing is, like I made the point here, you know, like that would suggest to me that would be someone experienced, but what one could flip that, turn it upside down, and go, wait a minute, actually maybe that's more a fresh set of eyes coming from a different, wheelhouse. But regardless of it being like something new or not, like that is still mightily impressive, I must say.
It really is, and I mean, I think that it's a really collaborative effort between him and Konomoto. Like Konomoto does all the writing, and and he's just working closely with Konomoto to, I think he did the character designs for Odd Taxi as well, and. Yeah, I think it's just they're working hand in hand on this, and so hard to maybe like credit one of them in particular. I think both of them deserve a lot of the credit for how the show's going. Although, I mean, you might think the writer Konomoto deserves the lion's share, and I mean, I wouldn't argue with you because again, the dialogue, the scripts are incredible stuff. And we'll just talk about a couple of episode directors for episodes 1 and 2 this time. We'll get to the people that did 3 and 4, even though we're covering them. Like, they also direct later episodes, so we'll get to them eventually. But episode 1, directed by Sayaka Yamai, and they worked on, they're mostly like an in-betweener, key animator, second key animator, for a lot of different things. For Pokemon at OLM, did some stuff for like Space Dandy, Yuri on Ice, Kill la Kill, some in-betweening. They did that work over at Studio Kara. And like, not directed a lot of things, did direct episodes of a couple different shows. The one that I'm most familiar with is Major, the second. And that's like, I don't know if it's like a reboot or a sequel to an older, like, I think it's like in the 2000s, a baseball show called Major that sports anime people really seem to like, that I need to get around to watching. But Yamai directed some episodes of that. Some episodes of Kira Kira Happy Hirake Kokotama, which I have no idea what that is. And so, yeah, other than that, not a whole lot of directorial experience. So some good experience for Yamai here. And might I say, an excellent job, because episode 1, like you said, fantastic. Episode 2, directed by Kenichi Nishita. And Nishita has a lot more directorial experience in terms of being an episode director. We got some Pokemon stuff. Pokemon Black and White Rival Destinies, Pokemon X and Y, and other stuff as well. Did some work on Young Blackjack, which is a show that I liked. It was a revival of the classic Tezuka property, Blackjack. You should see that movie, by the way, Shadon, the one that Manga Entertainment brought over, the Blackjack movie. I think you'd like it. It's a cool movie, an anime movie. Also worked on Major the Second, so the crossing of the paths there. And also did some directing on the Hunter x Hunter OAVs, episode directing, I should say. So, yeah, lots of experience. I don't know, directing, like, also really beloved titles in Japan, like Chibi Maruko-chan and Doraemon. So, yeah. So had some sacred cows for the Japanese.
I was going to say, Doraemon. Like, if there's one thing I know about that is wildly popular over in Japan. Still very much on long ongoing series, longer, or if not as long, almost as the One Piece manga. I'd be wrong on that, but it's been a very, very long time.
Yeah, one of those two recently ended. I can't remember which one. Maybe it was Chibi Maruko-chan. But
One Piece will never end.
No, I meant Doraemon or Chibi Maruko, but
okay,
that's really funny. One Piece will never end. You're right about that. I love when you get percentage updates from Oda, like, we're 75% through the story. It's like, let
me do the math on that. Oh boy.
Okay, so yeah, that's what we have for creatives this week. We'll get back to that next time, but some cool factoids there to learn. Like, these are some, we got some folks with experience and some folks who are relatively new, I think it would seem to me anyway, to anime, which is always exciting.
Yeah, good to see some fresh talent coming along here, and also just showing their craft here, like showing their ability. I'm thoroughly impressed with the show as well. Like, I would have thought, if you asked me to guess, like, okay, Shats, what kind of team do you think would have made this? I said it'd be a crack team of experienced people, like, who've worked in anime for ages and are finally doing the product or the show that they want to do. And I'd be a tiny bit right, because these are people doing the show they want to do. They just don't necessarily have much experience in the field. But that, again, is not necessarily a limiting factor so much as it can be an X factor, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, I am thoroughly into it thus far.
It just hit me, by the way.
Oh?
Looking at chat. This shouldn't have surprised me as much as it did, because the first 4 letters in Gorilla are Gori, but it's like, that guy is called Gori, but also the gorilla lady in Agretzko, isn't she called Gori as well?
Yes, she is.
So I was like, what? But then I remembered those are just the first letters of gorilla, and I was like, oh, it's not that big of a
well, we know now. We know now. Okay, I suppose we should move on then to Patreon questions, shouldn't we?
That's right. Patron questions, where we answer. Yes, where we answer questions that our lovely patrons have submitted over at the Discord. Again, meant to be like, you could submit a question no matter what it is about the show, and we must answer it thoroughly. So if you would like to participate in that, head on over to patreon.com/whatarewedeshow and sign up. If you want to talk about Odd Taxi or submit Odd Taxi questions, you'll need to sign up at the $3 tier to have privileges to go in those channels. And then you can ask us anything you want about these Odd Taxi episodes. And also you get other great benefits. I mean, while you're there, look around, see which tier works for you. We have 3 budget-friendly ones: $2, $3, $5. And
we do.
Sign up and get involved and get some extra content, some exclusive content. And yeah. So let's get to our questions. Who do we have this week?
We only have 2 actually, and these both come from Rackham. So we'll go straight. Yeah, thank you, Rackham. We'll go firstly into this one, which is, what are your thoughts on how the show uses characters like Kabasawa and Kakihana to depict different views on what people consider valuable and what measures someone's worth? Ooh, okay. So we should probably just establish...
Who is Kabasawa? Okay, I see. The hippo.
The hippo, yeah. So, oh boy. Well, I'll start with what I have on Kakihana, and Kakihana is the gibbon, the white gibbon that we mentioned before, who is going through the sepulture that is online dating. Poor bastard. I mean, I've actually been. I mean, I'll be honest. I've done online dating myself, and funnily enough, it's actually like the way that the show presents online dating and how it works, and if it works, is completely consistent with everything else it has depicted thus far. Even right down to who gets in a taxi, which is random chance to a certain extent, but arguably the major factor.
Unless you rig the game.
Unless you rig the game, yes. So Kakihana, of course, has been on dating websites and tried to find someone through that, but has not succeeded for a while, and specifically talks about specs.
Oh my god!
That is factoids, essential details, all this down to age, height, salary is a big part of it.
Men are PCs.
Yeah.
What are our specs? How much RAM do we have? Not enough.
No. Kakihana, he definitely isn't running on as much RAM as he would like, or rather, I mean to say that he works as a cleaner, and he massively overinflates his annual salary. I actually Google converted from yen to British pounds, like his actual honest to God cleaner salary that he put in before he overhyped it, and it was only something like 13.5 thousand per year. Now I don't know what that currently is in dollar value, but I can tell you over here that is probably minimum wage, if not substantially less than minimum wage. He ain't earning a lot. And in turn, we have Kabasawa, of course, who is the hippo, who is interested in going viral. Which I don't mean to say that he's secretly some sort of biological scientist trying to weaponize something, contrary to what people on the internet would tell you. But rather, he just wants to be social media successful. Maybe he wants to be an influencer, that kind of thing. He wants to be popular in that way. And one of the things I think Odd Taxi does a brilliant brilliant job of doing is clearly distinguishing between the idea of qualitative measures of one's worth versus quantitative measures. And it takes a definitive stance towards leaning on the former being the thing that actually has true value. We have the conversation, of course, with Kakiana and the bartender, rabbit lady, whatever her name is, I don't recall, where he tries to list his qualities and can only go so far as saying, "I won't hit you," which
that
again,
was the number one on the list.
yeah. And that gets the free non-nuclear principles joke, which is a thing I never thought I'd see, but it works and it's accurate because that is the lowest of bars to clear. So that is, of course, direct contrast to him, overinflating his actual wealth, his material wealth. And then, of course, we have Kabasawa, trying to figure out what it means to go viral, even as Sodakar, and it basically boils down to randomness. It really does.
Yeah.
But the problem is the thing that I need to note here about how there's a distinguishing fact between qualitative and quantitative measures of someone's worth is, while I absolutely agree with the show's perspective that qualitative measures, like, what is someone's personality, what is their character, their temperament, things that you can't put in numerical form, are absolutely the things that you should base a relationship off, be it romantic, friendly, you name it, whatever. There is unfortunately a harsh truth in that quantitative measures are easy to digest. Like, I can't say that I wouldn't want to, if I was doing online dating, know how much someone's earning. That is an important factor. The show even admits that.
Exactly. But I was going to say, Taiko, the bartender lady, the kangaroo you mentioned, she
kangaroo.
She pushes back on Kakihana and says, like, hey, what you make is important. Like, it is a measure of your worth, and it's like, security and things like, those things are incredibly important. Like, finances are incredibly important in relationships. So, she totally has a valid point in pushing back on him, but he has his head in the clouds. He's like, "Oh, don't you know anything about true love? Haven't you ever dreamed a dream?" So,
oh God! But the point though is that she is right, but people do start and stop their considerations of people there. But conversely, how do you make a good qualitative judgment of someone from an online profile of any sort? Whether it be romantic or just, hey, I'm looking at a content creator, there's so much performance behind it. The act of overinflating one's own annual income for the purposes of meeting someone online is an act of performance in of itself. And that is what this show is taking a broad but also intimate look at. It's covering all its angles on it.
I wouldn't be surprised if it because if it did this thing where, okay, so Kakihana has hooked up with is it Shiho?
Shiho, yeah,
Ichimura on the dating app, and you could see there being a conflict of him putting on this mask and sort of rigging the game to be like, like, I'm a rich person, like, I did that to attract you, but it's not really me. But he could, easily, I guess, turn the tables on her, or the show could make some commentary about that and be like, look, you wear a mask to work as an idol. Like, your whole job is performance. Your whole career is based on putting an image out there to try to get people to spend money on putting something out there that's not the real you. So, like,
do you know what's deeply ironic about that, though? And again, to the credit of this show's nuance and many, many layers, her and her colleague out of the three in the idol group are the least successful in selling merchandise, and they are the ones with masks on.
They're the masks, yeah.
Whereas Rui, who this is like me unraveling like the long, intricate tapestry of this, comes across as deeply authentic and personable and like as close as she is to real life as she is on stage. But then we get that scene of her backstage where she literally has gone from being a colorful character to wearing like all black. Like, she is a character, like, her color palette has actually darkened. So you have your visual layer there of how she is off screen, and then how she's talking coldly about moving merch and trying to basically chase metrics in not too dissimilar a way as to our hippo guy.
Yeah. I love
So
her, Shadon. I love how that we get to see that just total cynicism and like calculation and all that shit that she was putting out there, it's just gone. And she's just like all business, all like we need to hook more whales in gaming parlance, right? Like we need to get more big spenders.
We need to get more MIs.
Yeah.
Even though we've had two other shows in this year, one of which being One Dragon, the other of which being Kageki Shoujo, which goes to show that hooking those, they might put money in the till, but they don't do the best for your mental health. But that's a discussion for a different day. But yeah, like that, and I just want to like go back through the discussion, to go back through the point I have just elucidated to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at how many different chains there are between all of these characters and the relationships, just in terms of also how they relate to each other in the story, but how they thematically combine together. Like we went from Kakiana to Rui there, and then to Imai, and there's so many different like ways in which they are performative, and how the show examines them and contrasts them and compares them. It's kind of fucking brilliant. It's incredible how
really amazing.
Interwoven this all is. I absolutely love it.
It's a real web. Someone needs to do a cork board with thread and map out these relationships.
Mate, fucking, what's his name from Always Sunny in Philadelphia couldn't do it justice. I tell you.
I know.
But yeah, I think that to kind of like draw my answer to Rap's question to a close here, I think that the show does use them both to show through different lenses the same point, which is the qualitative measure of likes or one's salary, how we like create our own statistical like measures of ourselves and how we present them to the world versus the qualitative one. I mean, I'll point out as well, actually, something that Rackham himself just mentioned in chat that is worth knowing, which is the age cap. Kakian is 41, and Shiho is 18. Now, I want to point out that there may be something.
Is he also 41? Oh, no.
He's old as fuck. He is old as fuck. The age gap is substantial. It's definitely outside of the XKCD formula, that's for sure. But anyway, the point being is this. The first thing is, I want to say like there's could be something suspect going on with her, because you'll note that her manager was following her at the end of episode 3.
Yeah. Something about her kind of the way she comported herself was a little too, a little. She's trying to catch a fucking whale. And she's going after who she thinks has the most money. That's what I feel like that has to be it. Because she was so like, I mean, the things she said were really sweet, but there was a little bit of a kind of robotic manner in the way she behaved.
Look at the way it's lit as well. She's hiding in shadow inside inside the bus stop. There's no like color warmthness to that moment, even though there should have been
so great.
Yeah, it's great. There's something really off about it. What should be an unambiguously like it's on paper supposed to be like a really kind of like corny romantic moment where he's running through the rain and he catches up to her. She gives him an umbrella. Like on paper, that should be like the cheesiest but most like wholesome stuff. And yet that kind of color palette, the way that she's shot, all that stuff is spot on, unsettling. It's great. Anyway, I again need to. It's difficult to talk about something without going off on a tangent, because the tangents do lead somewhere in this show. But rather, again, I think that those two characters, Kabasawa and Kakiana, are two different lenses through which the show examines the same dichotomy between the numerical value of oneself in terms of like their wealth or their social media presence versus the quality behind it. I mean, Kabasawa, for example, has that thing where he's doing a cover of this song. He's trying to do what a lot of people might want to do on YouTube if they're musically inclined, which is, hey, I'm going to do covers of stuff and that'll get me famous and make me go viral. But of course the radio guys are like, what the fuck is this shit?
The Homo sapiens hate him.
It's absolutely, this is garbage. And they're people in turn who have their own screed on parasocial relationships and all that on the radio, which was quite fascinating. But yeah, it's just been great with those two. And I'm curious to see what happens next with them as well, because I get the feeling neither of them are done yet. But I am super into see what comes next.
Split up.
Yeah. I do feel bad for Kakiana specifically because I can feel some sympathy for his situation,
Oh
having
yeah.
been
Oh yeah.
kind of in that position in the past where I was like, oh God, like his reaction to like having those messages from someone like I've been there. I can absolutely relate. So I won't pretend like to mock him or anything when I've had the horse blinded on just as much. But nonetheless, like I appreciate the show for being authentic in that sense, while also still being incisive about his own behavior. Because make no mistake, even disregarding the age gap thing, which in itself is sketchy, like he is lying to her. Even if she came at him with complete honesty, like let's say she's completely authentically 100% into him, like from online, knows the age gap, knows all of that, and is not concerned in the slightest, and maybe something wholesome come out of this potentially, depending on your perspective, he still lied to her.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. She's gonna be
You know,
pissed when
one
she
one one
finds
does.
out he can't financially support their group.
Yeah, I don't know how the saying goes exactly, but one does not build houses on sand or however it is,
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
on shaky foundations.
Totally.
Anyway, do you have
Totally.
anything to add to that question, Doc?
So I think that the show is there's so many parallels. Like, I mean, just isolating these two characters in this way, I mean, we went on a million rabbit trails for a reason. Like, but I think, I guess, to boil down my thoughts on it, I mean, I think the show is really, really great about kind of nakedly showing that like people are chasing after something, like some kind of connection or recognition, and technology, modern technology via like apps and social media and everything like that has kind of come in and provides a facsimile of that, something that seems like it's gonna give us that recognition. Now if we go viral, like people will really see us. All my friends have, so I need to do it. Like if we get on a dating app or something like that, we can really connect with someone. But like you said, I mean, we don't know anything about the people we're connecting with. We're just kind of going fishing, and hopefully we get lucky. And I mean, and the kind of far end of that spectrum is our narrator in episode 4. What's his name? Tanaka.
Yep.
I'm looking for it. Yep, Tanaka. Who, like, I mean, he's just haunted by like the almost getting what he wanted, but the world pulling the rug out from underneath him, and like he's just hit rock bottom because he's been trying to like get what he wanted, get what all of us are looking for, totally the wrong way. And Rackham asks about human worth, and I just think like iTaxi is showing like that people are trying to have other people recognize their worth in just all the wrong ways,
Yep.
all the time. And like it seems like so far Otokawa is like the person that is kind of seems to be, even though he has lots of, he's got sleep problems and things like that, like he's out there, making real connections with people. And, maybe he is sort of will end up being the kind of example to follow in this regard. But this is a great question. I mean, I love this aspect of the show.
Mm-hmm. We'll have something similar to talk about now because we also have another question from Rackham that is about comparing two characters. The question goes, what similarities and differences can you see in the characters of Imai and Tanaka, as well as the industries they seem intent on spending all or nearly all of their money on, that being idols for Imai and a gacha game for Tanaka? So, context. Imai is the super fan. He is...
Mohawk.
I'm fairly certain he is the exact same as a character from Agretzko Season 3.
Yeah.
Because funnily enough, I got really, really strong vibes of that, right down to the location that the band were playing in.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, maybe it's a soft sequel to it. I don't know. maybe Odokawa's taken her home on a taxi ride once, and she's like done a karaoke. I don't know. I could see a crossover happening.
Is he meant to be a skunk, or is he like a raccoon? What is he?
I'm gonna say skunk. And for some reason, when you said raccoon, it just made me think of the animated show The Raccoons, and now I can't get that out of my brain. Um, oh God, help me! I can't remember what the name of those pink fuckers is, but anyway, he's a hyena
says
apparently.
Yuki.
Ah, that
Sure, I see
again.
it.
That's an Agretzko thing again, because wasn't that also like what was his name
The
again?
boyfriend, the not boyfriend.
Yeah, why can't I remember his name? I'm terrible. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so Imai, of course, is the super fan. And Tanaka is how do I even put this politely? Deeply damaged from gacha games.
Oh boy.
Yeah, to the point where, well, I mean, if Odakawa's not going to do the taxi driver thing, then Tanaka is. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I want to just quickly point out something that I think is worth noting. If you're watching Odd Taxi from a Western perspective, like me or you, Doc, for example, because make no mistake, if you are listening to this on, the closest I've ever been to Asia was my local takeaway. That's basically it. Christ, my bloodline is whiter than white, basically. You know what I mean. I don't try and pretend I'm someone not, but at least try and recognize that, this show is written in Japan and comes from a Japanese sensibility as well as an Asian one in general. And there have been reported documented cases of people outright fucking killing each other over rare items in MMOs, for example. My God. That has happened. I think it happened like one time in EverQuest. It might have been something else, perhaps. I don't remember the specifics of it offhand, but I know it's definitely happened. There was one guy like who had an eye about someone ninja losing a rare sword, and he killed him with an actual sword. God. Horrifyingly enough, but it has happened.
Like a Rangers Celtic thing. But Johnny Rackham, our friend Rackham in chat, claims that Imai is a skunk. So there's dispute about which animal. If we still were doing polls, we should do a poll of like, what is Imai? Raccoon? Skunk?
His attitude definitely stinks, so I'd say skunk.
Right.
No, seriously, I'll get to that in just a moment, because that's actually right. But yeah, so that has happened. So I can certainly believe Tanaka's behavior, but it's also just fascinating to get that full-fleshed, out backstory, even if it is being from him and therefore inherently unreliable. But the key difference between the two of them is what they're spending their money on specifically, even though both of them are spending it on a form of possession. And by that, I mean ownership of something. Even though you might think, wait, that doesn't apply to Imai. He spends time with Rui, but he has specifically said his language was, I get to own her. I will make her mine. The language is deeply possessive, invasive, however you want to describe it, all about ownership. It isn't about communicating, relating with her, or anything like that, even though in some way that has happened already parasocially from her to him, and that's what's drawn, that's what appeals to him, but he has no interest in reciprocating. He goes for a facsimile of that. But nonetheless, despite all of that, the object of his wealth, of his spending, is on a person. Whereas Tanaka's, unless you count him spending on himself as that, which I don't think is the same thing, is on nothing. Odd Taxi is brutally brutal about this, because the one thing he wants is a fucking dodo. He wants a digital super rare dodo. I think that doubly does not exist.
Right.
And of course, the hunt for the dodo led to it going extinct, and also led to leads only to destruction.
Dude,
and on top of that, Tanaka also pursues, when he's younger, erasers, tools of removal and destruction and correction. This guy, even though he works in a video game company, his entire life is characterized through one form or another of pursuing things that cannot inherently create. It is brutal watching his story unfold. It's painful because it's so consistent about that point.
I know. He's never gotten over the little boy inside him. Got his ass kicked and basically stole from his dad in order to get recognized by this small group of people who are also at the bottom of the social hierarchy in his class that he outlined. But he couldn't do it. Like, he still couldn't get it, and he's just never gotten over that. By the way, speaking of all this stuff, is Shirakawa Deshou Ichi, is she Ditch 11? Like, yes. She has the eraser.
That's the thing.
Eraser.
I watched episode 4 again. I was like, where the fuck have I seen that before? So I went back and did a zoom in enhance. But the fucking brilliant thing about that eraser, oh god, I love this show so much. The fucking brilliant thing about that eraser is this, right? Odokawa mentions at great length that he is into Rakugo as a means of trying to sleep, and the eraser, if I'm not mistaken, is shaped like a Rakugo Master.
Rakugo Master, yep.
So let's compare and contrast here. She somehow got hold of the eraser for him as a present, but that's because she recognizes the value and meaning of that item, even if it is just ultimately a cheap piece of rubber used for removing, pencil. Like, it has meaning to him. But unfortunately for Tanaka, like, the actual meaning behind it holds no value for him. It's rarity alone, and not the meaning behind that, is what he covers.
Yeah.
That's the distinction to be made. And that's, again, why this is so damning about his character, because there's no substance to any of it. There's not a single shred of substance to anything behind him. And if I'm being harsh about him, I am. But I also need to point out, like, you remember how we talked in Sonny Boy about the idea that structures of competition, and all that, like, inherently seem to just spring out of the ether even in their absence when you're put in a new position. Mm-hmm. That structure of competing over erasers of all things did not exist at one point in the past, but then it still came into play.
I know. And even when the teacher was like obsessively trying to like stamp out the like notions of superiority due to wealth in the classroom, like these hierarchies, it just seemed like were just emerging in the school socially, like, in addition to the ones that seemingly always emerge, like based on looks or athletic ability or whatever talent. Like, the fucking eraser collection thing happened.
I mean, that the fact it's erasers in itself is just, again, ties into how blunt and uncompromising this whole storyline is, because they're arguably one of the most worthless items one could have. Like, I mean, they obviously serve a function, don't get me wrong, but I'm not exactly in desperate need of one, nor are they, like, difficult to find. Their rarity is complete, like, the rarity that these guys are after is completely arbitrary. Their purpose isn't to create or do anything. It's not like having a rare pen where you can at least write something with it. There is that key difference in my mind. It's fucking nuts. But
thank God Odokawa has ended up with it. I feel like that's what's going to save his life. When
he's going to pass it over to
gets in the cab to kill him eventually, he's going to spot it and he'll finally have his eraser. This is my prediction.
That's a valid point. Maybe he jams the gun with it.
Maybe that would be quite something. That would be something. But I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
So yeah, just to bring us all in again towards the center here and just wrap up this question. I think that both characters, though, like, despite the differences, despite the fact that I would argue Maiwa being a shithead in his own right because of his behavior, unconscious though it is towards Rui, like, he's still the better of the two because ultimately he is spending on a person rather than just utterly nothing beyond nothing. Like, the almost, like, simmering hatred the show has for Gacha is impressive, and I can't really fault it for that, to be quite honest. But regardless of that, the commonality between the two of them, God, my brain's gone a bit mushy now all of a sudden. Damn you, Odd Taxi.
No, it's okay. I can pick up here if you want. I mean, because I see them both as victims. I mean, I don't think Tanaka isn't necessarily like a worse person. I mean, if anything, I feel sorriest for him of anyone because he just had no support system. He had a father that was not afraid of hitting him, a brother that would beat the shit out of him, like no friends.
You know what's funny?
Search for meaning through the eraser. Sorry, go ahead.
You know what's funny? Now that you mentioned Tanaka's like lack of friends and all that. When he's at the game company, even like we have like the opening contrast bit where he's like starting out and he's still relatively like neatly dressed. He's clearly showered. Also, kudos to the show for like showing he's actually getting sick from all of this. Like, holy crap! Like the times where he's coughing, like it's low key, but it's there. Yeah, but there's this coworker of his who actually is a rabbit
face.
Yeah, there is actually this co-worker of his, I think he's a rabbit. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Female co-workers.
Yeah.
Like, she pops in both of those scenes and says good morning. Now, nothing, too in-depth there. Like, nothing too, like, oh my god, this is a deep nuance. Of course it's not. It's just a colleague saying, but that door is always open. I'm not saying he has to pursue her romantically. I'm not saying he has to do anything other than say hi back. But that is an action of communicating and forming a relationship. It's there. Like, even when all of the doors seem closed, there is one right there behind him twice, even when he probably stinks like an open sewer, and he just can't see it because the horse blinders are playing this gacha game that's just completely devoured his life. Like, he describes it as sickness, mental illness, which I would probably argue is bang on.
Yeah,
like,
I think he's totally addicted at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. The horse blinders are just on that tight. So even then, the little detail like that, there's always the doors open. Like, that's a hopeful message of itself, like buried inside there that still says, hey, even when you're that far into it, it's not over yet.
Yeah, I think, pardon me. I think Tanaka, of the two here, if we're talking about differences between them, I think he has more self-awareness. I mean, I think he is very, seems to have his arms wrapped around his sickness, as he calls it, his condition. Whereas Imai, I don't think, he's, being exploited is a harsh word, I think, for his case, but he's definitely being, what's the right word I'm looking for? Because I don't think that, they're not duping him or anything like that, but they're definitely milking him for all he's worth, all he can spare.
Well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily even him specifically, though, that they're doing it. More just a case of that is the ingrained brats of the business.
Exactly. You're totally right. That's the whole construct, is for them to do this, and they've hooked him into it. But he just is totally, I feel like he's totally unaware that he is this way. Like, he's very kind of totally focused. I can't fix my lights. There we go. These timer lights are gonna just be the death of this live stream. It's just terrible. Horrible video. But anyway, Tanaka, even though he, you look at the two outwardly and be like, well, Tanaka's totally worse off. I mean, he's basically hit that point where he's kind of snapped because he hit rock bottom. And what does he say? He's hit the point where a blue flame has been lit inside of him, because I think he realizes, at this point, he has nothing else left to lose. Because, the one thing he was going after, my stomach, felt it drop when the phone went into the puddle. I was like, "Oh my god, no!"
You know what? Do you know what? Do you know what the worst thing is about that?
What's that?
People might call this a plot hole, but I don't agree. I think this actually is perfectly, which is just hear me out. That being an online service, the moment he pulled that ticket and got the dodo, it should have saved his account, even if his phone was fried.
It didn't sync, though. It did not sync. I feel like that has happened to, my kids play a lot of online service games. This thing has happened to them in Genshin Impact, where they had beat a dungeon and then their device ran out of power. And when they plugged it up, they had to beat the dungeon again. It said that you haven't cleared it because that, it hadn't synced. What they were doing on their device hadn't synced with their cloud account yet.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the explanation I would give is that somehow this service this fucking zoo thing of all.
Zuden.
Zuden, yeah. It has somehow been programmed so that until the person actually claims it, like that's when it locks in what the item is, which is disgusting. But again, this show has no love, no punches to be pulled for gacha. So if it would allow such things to happen where, like an ultra rare ticket that goes, they have to really spend it, and then they're going to keep going for it. They're going to keep fucking going for it. I'm just like, that's in itself is even more predatory. It's
oh yeah,
like it's shocking.
Just the worst luck imaginable for this kid, and yeah, I mean, and now he's at this point where he feels like he has total freedom now, like because he has nothing to lose, he has no one. He
had his bird Maru, and that was gutting. Oh, that was so gutting. Because
she has died the same day that his phone, when he realized that his account hadn't saved the dodo.
In the pursuit of a fictional digital representation of an extinct bird, it cost the life of a bird that he owned and had been his companion since childhood. Just breathe and think about that for a second, because holy fucking shit.
I know. Clearly he neglected. I feel like his neglect is part of that bird's death. But like, I mean, for me and you on the outside, his gacha struggle may look silly, but like, I mean, you saw how much it meant to him. He was weeping. Like, that his 16-year struggle has culminated in this moment. He's finally got the eraser. He's finally got the dodo. He's finally going to be on top of the leaderboard and get recognized.
All just snatched away from him for no reason.
He's gonna and not just get recognized by the blob that is the general public, but Ditch 11, the same person that took that was bidding against him for the eraser and was now above him in the leaderboard. He's gonna get one over on Ditch 11. So this has like become like a quest. And it was all taken away from him randomly. And so like to be that close to something you've worked your whole life for and have the brass ring snatched out of your fingers. I mean, you can see how it would drive anyone to like the brink in their life. And so, yeah, I mean, I have so much sympathy for him. I feel so terrible for this character, and I want him to turn it around so badly. I have like a little bit less sympathy for, I don't know. He's like, we haven't really got to peek inside his head though, the way we have. Yeah. So like maybe there's more going on there, but he seems pretty clueless, and he seems, I don't know, like kind of a douche in some ways. Yeah. Like, oh, I don't have any money to pay you because I just bought all these lottery tickets. Oh, I'm going to buy another lottery ticket. Oh, well, you just shorted me. Thanks. You know what I mean? And I don't know. He has no... I don't know. Go ahead.
The commonality is just come back to me that I was going to mention between the two of them is that, again, while they are spending their stuff on different things, they are spending it on possession. To reiterate again, there is no use of their money for anything worthwhile in terms of like an experience one could spend with other people, or even a solo experience for that matter. I mean, well, not intended to be direct comparison, there are plenty of scenes in these episodes where you have characters talking like at the kangaroos bar, for example, and hey, that's money not badly spent in my opinion. Nice feel, talk to people while you're there, because that works. But yeah, it's crazy like that. The show like just has no love for either industry, and I'm glad that it's unreserved while also not being didactic, I should stress as well. There's no actual, like, beyond maybe what Tanaka says, but even then is this coming from his own perspective. Like, he's not flat out telling people, like, in a very preachy PSA way that this is wrong. You can infer that from his state of being. But nonetheless, like, it makes no bones about, like, how these industries are and how player and creator are also exploited as well.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. I mean, it's funny, like, this answer, I feel like the answer I would give dovetails so much with question one, because I'll use a word that Otokawa and his alpaca friend, whose name I can't remember, Shirakawa, used while bantering. Makeshift, cheap substitute. What both of these guys are pursuing so hard is a cheap substitute, a makeshift fulfillment, makeshift recognition and human connection. It's just a total smoke and mirrors, hollow facsimile of that built into these apps, or this whole like idol fandom experience. And yeah, it's all about like simulating that, but you're not really giving the real thing to these people. And it's just sad because they're going to keep coming back again and again and getting the kind of temporary dopamine hit, and then still being left empty in the cold light of day. And it's just very sad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even like plenty of other films and shows cover this. Like Megalobox Season 2 did a little bit of this, looking at toxic masculinity. Fight Club had a little bit of this as well, at least the version that actually exists and not the version that people pretend exists. Where they just don't fucking get the message of it. But again, Fight Club, of course, was about
welcome to all popular shows.
Shows, but again, Fight Club was about the cheap substitute for genuine like emotional connection. Firstly, starting with self-help groups, and then actually starting with fighting to the point where they're all turned into mindless, emotionless automata. Supposedly is the perfection of like masculinity, but they don't think for themselves. But apparently that message was lost on people. I don't know. But anyway, neither here nor there. Right. Do you have anything else to answer that question, Doc?
His name is Otokawa Hiroshi. His name is Otokawa Hiroshi. His name
and he is the old taxi driver.
No, I mean, no, I thank you, Rackham, for sending in these excellent questions. Really appreciate your taking the time to give us such thoughtful ones.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, I suppose it's time for us to move on to talking points.
Yeah, discussion time.
I'm going to let you get started on yours while I quickly nip away to go grab a drink. I'll only be a moment, but do take it away, my friend.
Okay, all right. I'll try my best here because I was hoping in this discussion, as let's be real here, a lot of the time, just kind of bounce off of things Shadon says. Because, like, beyond the character interconnection and the, rollicking good time that is, like, following the dialogue and everything like that, I don't really have a ton of, like, notes and outline points that I want to delve into, and we've already kind of like gotten into some of them. So yeah, I mean, I just love the show, and I think that there's so much going on with it. And Shadon, the only thing you miss is me saying I don't really have too much in the way of talking points that we haven't gotten into. So I was hoping to, like, since you have so much, kind of be the wall that you bounce things off of and respond to what your notes have.
All right, then. Well, I think the first thing I'll mention is I want to point out one of the deep ironies of this show, which is about Otokawa's own profession. Mm-hmm. He often protests the people he meets about, them living their lives directed by others who know very little about them. Like the pursuit of viral approval and all that. Mm-hmm. But again, I mentioned before about how this show highlights that while the idea of a parasocial relationship has become more formalized in recent years due to the rise of social media, it has existed for obviously a very long time before that, even before things like celebrity culture. Because what else would you call a taxi driver than a parasocial relationship where your actions are dictated by someone else? The direction of Otokawa's life is pretty much actually set by other people. His interactions with other people, now he has friends, of course, such as Kakiana, but his work is in of itself something that is directed by other people in a way that is dissimilar, but not so much so from people like Rui, for example. The course of her career is dictated by fan response. Mm-hmm. So, we're all under the same society here, where even if you think yourself haughty or mighty, high and mighty enough, or dare I say, even maybe low key, grounded, or whatever you want to call it, that you think that working as a taxi driver lets you be free from the influences of other people, then you're not. I mean, the funny thing is, even though, like, was it Dobu? Was it? I can't remember his name. Dobu, that was it. Even though Dobu like has the most control over Odokawa's direction by virtue of having a gun, like, is that so different from the force, like, behind, the Hippo Kid in episode 1? Still telling him to go to a place, pretty much. It's just not quite with the same level of force, but nonetheless, like, for all of Odokawa's protestations, he operates under the same system that he criticizes. So fuck capitalism, I guess, because that's what causes it. And if you think I'm being like, glib with that, again, I'd like to point out that why this Monkey Man's name just completely left my brain. It's on my notes here. 1 second.
You know what?
Kakihana.
There are many monkeys, of course.
Yeah, Kakihana, of course, has to measure his value as a person against the value of his paycheck. Even though, by all accounts, despite him having not really much of his much distinguishing characteristics, he's not a bad person. I feel like we can fairly say that, even if there isn't much otherwise that I could describe about him as a character. Like, he seems uncomplicated, and that's not a bad thing in of itself. But yeah, I just found that fascinating that, in its own way, like, even though we tend to think of parasocial relationships as having the most effects and force in social media driven, engagement driven environments, which is true that they do, there is still a way in which it affects the lives of people you might otherwise not think, and people who are probably not even aware of it, like Odokawa. So a deep vein of irony running through the show there, but one that I found really interesting to think about.
Yeah, Odokawa is a great character, isn't he? I mean,
again, he's the classic sagely taxi driver.
He sort of is, but like, like, almost for a different time, because I don't think of him as a know-it-all sage. If anything, like, he feels like he doesn't feel like as kind of cynical as someone his age maybe would.
He says he's okay with dying. I'd say that's pretty cynical.
Well, if he'd rather die than go through something that's a pain in the ass. I think he was saying. Which
I can't be asked with this.
I know, he's just like, because there's like a hierarchy of bad things, right? There's like, he'd rather live, but if he has to live and get involved with this pain in the ass criminal enterprise, I'd rather die. It's just just a balance of things. But he feels like, and I think the director said this, like, he really did feel like, to me, someone who was kind of dragged into middle age. Like, he hasn't settled down. He is having things like sleeping trouble. The way he doesn't relate to people super naturally doesn't really seem like, grr, I'm old. It more seems like he's just kind of awkward.
Does seem to have a past trauma of some sort as well.
Totally. But he seems more like I don't know, he's just got something of a youth about him still. And I don't know, like, he doesn't really seem inclined to accept a lot of things that come his way. He's like always has these witty comebacks and is like pushing back against things, like I don't know, he's a fascinating character, and I'm so hopeful and rooting for him and Shirakawa. I love them together. I think that they're adorable together. But I mean, this is why I say I'm hopeful, and I'm root, because, like, I don't. It's by no means a a guarantee. Do you know something? Or
well, this is going to lead into my next talking point, which is I want to actually talk about the mystery element. Now, I did say earlier that the mystery element of this show is the least interesting part of it thus far, but I must again stress my point that is a relative assessment and not one based in it simply being bad or unappealing. Right. The mystery is appealing, and I think one of the things I've said yeah, and I think one of the things I've said historically on this podcast is the mark of a good mystery is when it gets you ruminating on what things might be. So, for example, I actually had this belabored, crazy theory that the kid who had disappeared, who Odokawa himself has been fingered as being the person who took her, was possibly a part of the same idol industry as Rui was. Maybe Rui was bought as a replacement for her, and then she was booted out. And in turn, I wondered. I didn't immediately make the connection that Shiho was one of the other idol girls, but I thought then that the people who came after her, the manager, were like maybe picking them up, like abducting them or something, trying to blame other people. Like a lot of rampant speculation, not necessarily based on a lot of substance, but nonetheless, it's got me thinking. It's got me wanting to know where the mystery is going next. But also, there are a lot of little hints here and there that are worth noting.
Oh yeah.
So I want to note one very small moment, which is that Shirakawa absent-mindedly rubs her ring finger, but there is no ring. That's
interesting. Really, I didn't catch that.
Yep, that's when she's in the taxi. Second question: why does she have a picture of Odokawa at all on her phone? Where did that come from?
I don't think it wasn't a picture, was it? Wasn't it just he was looking at the camera that was turned to face like selfie-wise?
I don't think so, because otherwise they would have presumably animated that.
Well, he was just looking down. It was like a picture of him looking down at the phone as he was doing while he was driving. Like, I thought it was just kind of a clever romantic thing. Like, I have a picture of someone I like.
I'll just put the selfie.
Hand him a mirror, basically. You know what I mean?
I get where you're coming from, but if that was the case, I wish it had been animated to make that clear. Because to me, it suggests that she's got a photograph of him. But then, where the fuck would that have come from?
I couldn't tell you.
But then the next thing is also there seems to be medicine missing from the hospital. Any possibility that might be sleeping pills of some description?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know what the drugs are, but I'm quite confident that she sold them to Dobu. You know, how she mentions her one regret in life is taking out a student loan, and he's like, "Are you still paying it off?" And she's like, "No."
But well,
what she regrets about it is that she had to become a drug dealer to pay it off.
There we go.
That's how I feel it's going to turn out.
Yeah. Fair enough then. But there's something suspect about her. I don't know. I can't place my finger on it beyond the fact that she has the ring finger bit. And I'm really wondering if there's actually past history between her and Odokawa that he does not remember. There's something. Yeah, there's something not right here. I don't know.
It'd be weird though, because she's much younger than him. She's like in her early 20s, you know.
So
or mid 20s.
She's 28.
Yeah. So it's tough. Like, you think she would be the one not to remember because it would be memories that she had when she was very young. But
what if she? I'm talking maybe more recent years, like it. We're going to need to obviously let the fullness of the show come out here, but something seems really off. Like, and I mean, if it turned like what a crazy thing it'd turn out if they were previously married, and then whatever trauma he went through caused him to forget. She still remembers, but it's like crazy things have happened. I don't know, but there's something going on. I'll tell you that. Other thing I want to note as well, of course, is the fact that we get a hint that maybe Odokawa actually did it. Like, he's talking to someone.
He is, yeah. That can't be as straightforward as it seems.
No, it can't. It can't be. Is it voices in his head? What is going on here? But all of what I'm saying here, I'm not simply just tick boxing all of the things I've noticed, even if I got some of them wrong, which I'll freely admit. I want to know that this show has me engaged. It's making me keep an eye out for the details. Like, now that I know, for example, about the eraser returning, holy shit. Which, again, I must stress, not only is it there as a MacGuffin, but also as a distinctive point between the value of an item. I think I talked about this in Sarazamai as well when we did that, where I talked about like how items have, of course, different values to different people. And what was fascinating about it in this case was it had value to her as something she could use to connect with him. Whereas it only had value to Tanaka because of its rarity, and the fact that it was of a Rakugo master is completely and utterly incidental. So there you go. He has no reason, no desire to engage it, no desire to learn that person. They are not believe that point. But the mystery, nonetheless, is super intriguing. Like, why are the cops corrupt? What's going on here? Who's the who's the fucking crime boss? How are they all linked together? Is Rui on it? Like, she seems to know what's going on. What the fuck? How does she know about this? Yeah. Is Shiho like, like what's her angle with poor Kakiana? who can say? But the
How are they
mystery,
all connected?
yeah,
They were all in the same plane that crashed.
what a
years
what
ago.
a tangled web. What a tangled web we weave when first it is that we deceive, I believe it goes.
It's true.
But
it's true.
yeah, I'm fascinated with the mystery as well. But and that's even then when I say like that it's the least interesting part, it still gets me thinking. It has me engaged. So kudos to the show for doing that, because it'd be all too easy for the core. I mean, other shows or it's like works have done this. Like the central mysteries, for example, say behind the Persona series, they're okay. No one really cares about them, to be quite honest, relative to the social links
the
stuff.
Slinks. yeah
the slinkies. But like that doesn't mean that they couldn't, the central mystics couldn't have been stronger, but Odd Taxi's doing both. Okay, next point, I want to make a small comparison here between and just also to reinforce my point about the idea of authentic moments and how they happen and what circumstances cause them to happen. And Odd Taxi does this for a couple of visual metaphors. The first of which is the gacha game. Now, I understand that this show, and I've said as much, this show like absolutely has it out for gacha games. It will nail them to walls given the chance. But I want to know that it does accurately point out the fact that the joy that comes from a gacha game is from the random, is part and part from the randomness, the rarity of it. These things that the game tells you have value are increasingly rare. And so, like, in turn, also, then there is the fact that Imai is buying lottery tickets. Again, random chance in that. It's consistent with this. You could argue in turn, perhaps, also that the Razor was perhaps random chance, because you can't know with any certainty how much one will bid, or even if you'll receive the item. So there's that. But the point being, of course, is that in turn, by comparing to Odabaku being a taxi driver, like, when you're a taxi driver, you have no idea who you're going to pick up. It's coincidence that you happen to be in the particular location that, causes people to get you on, say, the Uber app, or just to flag you down. And yet, if we go back to Hippo Kid, we'll know the thing that he goes viral with is an authentic interaction that came about by happenstance because he happened to be in Odabaku's taxi at that particular time, having that particular conversation. Now, there's probably no causal connection to that necessarily between that and it going viral. It could just be as arbitrary as the next thing. But all of the moments that happen in this show thus far that are genuine, that are meaningful, come from happenstance. They come from randomness. Even like Kakiana's like time on the dating website, like it just happens to be that Shio found him at that particular time, on there and messaged him. He's been at that for such a long time that it's its own kind of lottery. I can confirm that from my own experience with online dating. It is a lottery. You can increase your chances of it. He tries to rig the game by, amending his value as his wage on there.
It's so funny. He puts money in metaphorically, the way that you would put money into a gacha game, into a slot machine,
He's expected to get interest, just not of the fiscal kind.
Best value pack. This box guarantees at least one purple rare.
Yeah. And then of course the fact that like by complete coincidence, Odabaku also then picks up the fucking radio producers he's been like listening to all this time.
Wild, yeah. The Homo. Are they called the Homo sapiens? I think it is. Yeah, I can't remember. Their actual names.
They were originally called Bono Illumination, if I recall correctly.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that was the original one.
Yeah.
But all of what, and then of course, like all of the random incidents that happen in themselves, like finding the gun, like how the hell did Saka find the gun there? Like, he just happened to find it randomly. He was trying to bury his bird.
God. He was like, God has given me a gift, or like,
but
this
God
made him think that there was a programmer, because this is like a video game shit,
But God is often used as a rationalization for random chance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I really appreciate about Taxi is that it's very honest about like how these things work. How do you meet someone that you're romantically interested? The one person for you. How does that happen? It's random. You've got to be in the game to let it happen, of course, but you can't force it. If you try and force it, like say maybe lying about your salary, you'll only end up like cheating yourself out of being in to win. And then, of course, like again, the comparisons to the lottery, all that sort of stuff. It's very, very consistent with this examination of random chance and showing that authentic, genuine moments are the products of that by being in the right place at the right time. Now, that obviously doesn't devalue like who you are as a person, but rather if you think to yourself like that, I'm going to go on a dating website and find someone, that may well happen, but I can offer you no guarantee of success of it. It absolutely isn't guaranteed. Even if you put money on a premium one, again, I'll speak to my own experience of that. If you want to, buying the lottery doesn't mean you're going to win it.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. So all of these things that they place, like extreme value on, they've got to be in it to win it to begin with. But again, the show is making a distinction just because like some things happen randomly, like the gacha stuff, they are not necessarily inherently valuable. What is valuable is things like, hey, Shirakawa and Odabako in the park, all the conversations that happen in the taxi, all that sort of stuff. Like, all the good moments between characters, the fun moments.
Mm-hmm.
You can, of course, referencing something I was going to bring up, which is again comparisons to Tomazaki.
Right.
Yep. Gamification. Yeah, it's happening. But yeah, the show's ultra consistent, and I think it's on point with its message that if good things will happen, you have to be open to them happening, but you can't force them.
One thing I will say that's neither here nor there in terms of what you were just talking about, not anything quite that deep, but I'm really happy that the show has decided to go with anthropomorphic animals for its characters. Like, I don't know. Listen, maybe I'm a furry at heart. This really does it for me. Like, I'm immediately endeared to all the cast, like 10% faster or like 20% harder. You know what I mean? Like I think it's a nice, like, almost like a buffer or like a, something to like a sweetener to the real kind of gloomy nature of the story. In fact, I think I am totally lifting this phrase from the director interview that he did with ANN, and that's part of the reason why they did that. And I think that was such a smart decision because I don't know, just it lends to the comedy, and it adds comedy to, like, there's like a layer of just the comedic to a lot of these scenes where a gibbon and a walrus with a huge walrus with a tiny hat are talking about their relationship problems with a bartender kangaroo. I mean, it's really fun and funny and endearing. They're also endearing.
How big is your affection? How big is your affection for it? It's about American supplement size. Whoa, that's huge.
See, and like the rapidity with which the comebacks are fine in the dialogue, and how like later on it's like, so did your affection grow? Now it's the size of Jupiter. Like it's just all so witty and fun, and not in
Odakawa is very dry as well.
Yes, very dry. It's not in that, like, and perhaps this is like the language difference at play here, but like it's not. When I think of films or TV where all the characters, or a lot of characters in a particular show or movie, are incredibly witty, it can be a really big turnoff to me, Shadon. Like, a lot of Joss Whedon stuff feels like that. Diablo Cody's scripts that I've seen.
Too much banter.
The Juno movie that she wrote. Like, everyone is the fucking funniest person in the world. Everyone has razor sharp wit. But like here, it just feels more natural. It does not feel constructed in that way.
You know what's funny? I will absolutely agree with you. I like those shows in themselves, and that film. But what I will point out is that you can still try and do that if it's in a story to show that someone's trying too hard, or you take it from the writer trying too hard to be the character.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that applies in those
that way. You know what I mean? And like, everyone's such a tryhard, and like delivering these totally like, this one doodle that can't be undid, home skillet. Like, come on, Who says that
I'll be
shit? No one says
I'll be
that
in my
shit.
I'll be in my bunk.
Yeah.
That's Jane from Firefly.
Yeah,
Ah,
right.
dear. Um, okay, so I have one final talking point, and this is actually kind of two separate scenes that kind of work in concert to make a point. I believe it's Rui talking with her manager at one point about the fans that she has, specifically Amai. And I think there's some discussion at some point about the fans. In fact, this may very well have actually been her two compatriots from the island. I can't quite remember. There was a conversation in an episode at some point where they they discuss like the idea of how the fans they have at the early start of their career are different from those who come later. And there's kind of the implication of fear of creating an echo chamber where you ultra focus on that particular group of people at the expense of widening your appeal. And this, of course, being again capitalism at work here, you obviously want a wide appeal. You want optimize revenue. This ties into
this is what the two this is what the Homo sapiens were saying as well. They
this
were having
is
that argument.
This is the second scene I was going to bring up in discussion with this because
sorry,
the thing
jumped the gun.
No, you're entirely right to bring it up. Because they, of course, have their very open and frank discussion on the radio about the fact that they have disagreements over, like, you know, how much fans get to indirectly dictate the output of their work. Indeed, one of them goes almost close to calling it parasocial, where people are like, you know, hey, you don't get to dictate what we do. We want to be authentic. We want to create our own work untainted by your influence and not to meet your demands specifically. If you happen to like us by coincidence, and that's all well and good. Whereas the other one's like, well, actually, no, fan opinion does matter. And I'm going to use a real world musical band example here that I noted. This is entirely aesthetic, I admit, although I also had a great disdain for when one of their most famous and successful songs came out. I'm talking about the Kings of Leon.
Okay.
So the Kings of Leon. I remember when they first came out with one of their first singles, which was
I could use somebody. Them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. This is where I get to ramble a bit on my soapbox about music, but like they literally started out looking like they were straight out of the Waltons. Like they had like the full blown like hair flares, full beard, and then that seemed to gradually disappear, and then they became more mainstream looking as time went by. Like over the course of 3 albums, it was almost like Samson's hair working. Because for whatever you want to say about their first album, I was like, it's well enough good. It's infinitely superior to a song called "This Sex on Fire," which is just to me like the most vapid appeal to, you know, the promiscuity culture of that time. But the fact of the matter is, whether I like that or not, they were in tune with what people wanted en masse, and that song did gangbusters. So, unfortunately, I've seen firsthand through that example, and this is merely my own opinion, of course. If you like that song, you're welcome to it. Then that's fine. But rather, I mean to say that unfortunately both sides are correct and there is that tension between the two, even though I do think Odd Taxi, generally speaking, leans towards authenticity through spontaneity rather than forcing something. Hence why Gacha is the poisonous creature that it is, because it is trying to enforce a moment. You know, it's all about enforcing that moment. Yeah, it is all about that, enforcing that moment. But nonetheless, like it recognizes rightly that it's not as simple as just be purely authentic, because, well, there's discussion, of course, about making rent, like they mentioned at one point about living in an expensive area. One of the characters is ashamed by his lack of wealth, even though, from my perspective, he's making, you know, money and keeping a roof over his head, and that's admirable. Like, it's difficult enough these times, but also granted, he should be on a good wage, or a living wage at the very least. You get my point. So I like that you have these separate cases that basically examine the same point. Again, many lenses pointing to to the same problem here and offering their opinions on it, and a nuanced but also mature understanding of the situation in the authenticity and the desire for it, and the, you know, is all well and good. And indeed, people get their start by being that way, by being authentic. But then over time, they lose that in order to conform to the demand that the industry puts on them,
Exactly.
and they lose that. And there's a tension between keeping those two things together.
Yeah.
Some people can still handle that, but it's as random as meeting someone online, whether or not that works out or not. And
Yeah.
again, for all my bitching about, like, say, the Kings of Leon example, from a businessman perspective, they made way more money off that single than they did anything prior to that. So while I personally think it sounds like absolute drivel, again, just pandering to an audience here, hey, it made them more money I'll probably ever see in my fucking lifetime. So kudos to them. Fuck you, capitalism. Basically, I'll punch the Monopoly man in the face.
Yeah, it's too bad they didn't use it as a platform to make their art movie. You know what I mean? Like we were talking about at the beginning, the bestseller finances the art house picture.
If only.
Yeah,
if only.
yeah. I mean, just I mean, we've talked about that both on and off mic regarding this podcast. Like, in terms of like how far do we want to go to provide a flavor that is appealing to the palate of the most people without crossing that line where you become flavorless and nobody enjoys what you're doing. It's tough, and like
Kurt Cobain famously had that problem. He went on record many times saying that he had no interest in the pageantry or the theatrics of the music industry. He wanted to go and perform, and that was really about it. And unfortunately, that resulted, in part at least, in what led to his death, at least in my opinion.
Oh gosh, yeah. Thankfully, we're not watching the anime that forces us to have discussions about Kurt Cobain and we're not watching Listeners, which is definitely a good thing. So,
yep.
All right,
man. That really was the anime equivalent of Sex is on Fire.
Pain by numbers, right there. Okay, so I don't have any other points.
Oh, I do have one final broad observation, which I also really like in this show. Now, all of the things being linked together that we no, I can't do justice to that. I want to note as well, like, this show rightly also makes note of the fact that there are always interesting things going on that you may not be aware. I mean, I think it was it in the film adaptation where I think it's Nicolas Cage's character is asking something of some guy who's like in a forest, and he gives a massive rant about like how every single day there's something happening around, like, just around the corner from where you live, like people struggling against life and death, because Nick Cage's character is like being a trainee screenwriter. He's like, but how do I like write a good story? I can't remember the specifics offhand. It's just come into my head here. But the point is that if you can't like find drama in the world around you, like the guy says, then you shouldn't be writing any fucking scripts. But he's also accurate in his assessment that drama is happening around us constantly. Now, we've seen already the kind of tapestry that all of the characters, like Odokawa's taxi notwithstanding, like where they're all linked together by this. The gun, the eraser, all these items, all these people all coming together. But they're, for the most part, completely unaware of each other. And I don't actually want... If there's one thing I want our taxi not to do, I don't want it to be some massive grand conspiracy where everyone's a chess piece. I want it to be more the kind of connections through chaos that real life is. Because it just goes to show as well that for people who think there isn't anything interesting going on around there, there is. You might need to change your definition of what counts as interesting, but there are, for example,
or get involved and find out what other people are up to.
I mean? you can't win the game if you're not playing it, as the show alludes to. But I mean, just to put a hypothetical out there are many people living on my street. I'm not privy to their private lives, nor do I want to be, because they are their private lives, of course. But they're living their lives, like there's a lot going on in them, presumably. It would be naive of me to think that nothing interesting happens, in the world, generally speaking, at least in the vicinity around me. Who knows? And obviously we don't necessarily want to be involved in all of that because it would be overwhelming. people's private lives, their private lives, and all of that stuff they're mentioning. But rather, I just want to point out again that in relation to Hippo Kid's desire for, a viral moment, viral moments are probably happening all the time, but many of them don't get documented.
Right. Yeah.
But that just goes to show, like, that you can't force these things. You just have to, be out there in the world.
Are we gonna is the message of this essentially gonna be the John Mayer song 3x5? Are you familiar with this song?
I am not.
Just all about how, like, he went to the Grand Canyon and took a bunch of pictures, but he realized he didn't live in the moment and experience anything, and he's gonna do it again, but this time no more 3x5. It's a sappy, super sappy, very early John Mayer that I was forced to listen to in college quite a bit. And then for a while I listened to my own volition before I grew to detest John Mayer, the human.
Yeah. A valid point in that song, though, nonetheless, and a point that this show makes. I mean, to sum it up, like with Tanaka specifically, he is more interested in being in one particular game that holds no intrinsic value to its outcome, as opposed to the game that is out there all around him that has so much more to it than that.
Yeah.
And it's not even a question in that case of monetary value beyond selling an account, because he doesn't intend to do that, despite the fact that the show does again show its research by bringing that up, because account trading does happen in that sort of stuff. But rather, he wants to be, noteworthy.
Yep.
And that's also true of Hippo Kid. But
they want to be seen. You can't put a price on that for them.
Yeah, but can someone not be noteworthy in other ways that are more meaningful than that?
Oh, I would definitely agree. I mean, I would say that the show is saying, like, that this is a false noteworthiness. This is just this fleeting cardboard cutout of what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly. And lest you, by the way, with the intent, of course, being fair and open here, lest you think I, am being critical of the characters in this show, I am arguably guilty in my own way of, like, being a metric chaser or a metric observer and getting annoyed at metrics not being as high as I would like, and so on.
Gosh.
So,
yeah.
But I think it's one of those things where we've entered into this kind of like a social media driven world now, where with the genie out of the bottle and not going back in, we didn't realize that by giving everyone the power to engage in a metric driven system of engagement, how much people would come to rely on it, and how it has perhaps maybe taken away a little bit of the authenticity, which is also just
us.
yeah. One side thing then I just want to say that I hope does happen, and the age gap is squiffy on this, but I'm actually of the opinion that I would like Kakian and Shiho to have something happen. And it doesn't even need to be a relationship thing. Maybe they can be friends. But rather, I want to bring that up because, like the Dr. Manhattan quote, it's like spinning gold out of air, out of all that chaos, something decent happened.
You know what? This is, I am totally of the same mind that they will both see that each one of them has done something reprehensible, and they'll both be like, well, we're both fuck ups that have done wrong, like, but let's get to know each other, man. I still kind of like you. You're still all right.
Yeah,
we can be honest with each other now that we've uncovered our mistakes.
Age gap squiffy, but maybe Odd Taxi can also make that point that okay, there is something off about that, but maybe that's not in this particular instance like a deal breaker. I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to judge you on the merits as it comes along. But anyway, that's the end of my talking points. I've rambled on for a bit because this show makes me ramble because there's so much good stuff to talk about. And everyone's been telling me in chat, like, how the hell can you restrain yourself? Like, and I don't know if God, it's going to be difficult because part of the thing about this particular podcast format is we try to do it in a sense where we do these blocks. That way we can then like have some elements of speculation. Like I've already speculated about what's coming next with, Shirakawa, for example, but also like, I just kind of want to do the whole thing, but we will restrain ourselves and do episodes 5 through 8 next time.
Yeah. I mean, and Yuki was saying like, if you watch ahead, it'll be difficult to do, just the chunk of episodes. And I mean, that's a fair point. Once I get to episode 8, what's it, 5, 6, 7, 8? Yeah. Once I get to episode 8, I'll have to make a decision.
Yeah. But I mean, that is part of it as well, because one must also remember that Odd Taxi was released week by week.
Mm-hmm.
So the way the show is meant to be enjoyed is built into its structure and its release schedule. I mean, that's why some shows like don't linger in the memory very long, because they get released all in one go. This is also why, for example, JoJo's, I could not stomach watching all of part 3 as a binge watch, because it was just the same shit over and over again, basically.
Yeah.
But it made part 4, which I did watch every week while it was airing, was so much more digestible and enjoyable, despite conceptually being very similar in terms of what each episode's format was relative to part 3, which was, here's a stand fight. And so with Odd Taxi, of course, is a mystery that is meant to be put together piece by piece. And so we can't have a discussion if we watched all the rest of the series in one go, in the way that we would have done if we watched it week on week and then got to like episode 8 and there wasn't an episode 9 ready yet. So we'll, of course, adhere to this format, because that's going to be part of how we could criticize and deconstruct the mystery.
Yeah. I mean, even if I watch ahead, I certainly won't. I will not bring in knowledge to the pod.
You'll be there last.
It's like when I had read the Promised Neverland manga when we were doing the first season of that, and I had some foreknowledge, but I tried my best not to let that.
Did you read the whole manga?
Well, it hadn't been released at the time. I didn't know. The manga is not. The manga is much better than the anime, all told. Like the anime.
That's why I laughed.
Yeah,
that's why I laughed, because you said you're reading it. I thought, well, you actually did yourself a favor by reading that before the anime. I realized you weren't referring to season 2, so never mind.
Oof. Okay, I think we're gonna end our discussion here. Yeah, that's Odd Taxi 1 through 4. Tremendous start to the show. A show that I think.
Well, how good a start, Doc. We need to rate it.
I think I'm right in saying could be in the front runner spot for anime of the year once all said and done. But yeah. Shadon makes a good point of order. We have to rate and justify our ratings. So how would you rate this first block of episodes on a scale of 1 to 5 somethings?
Well, no pretenses, no bullshit. 5 out of 5 super rare dodos. Done. Moving on.
5 out of 5 tiny hats on the heads of huge walruses. Done.
With fish on them, no less, as well.
Yes. Yes, the fish hats. Man.
Well, I mean, I did make the taxi driver comparison before, and you know full well that because the walrus is mostly hairless, he can't be doing a mohawk, so we're okay. We're safe, dog. We're safe.
Shadon, if people want to continue discussing Odd Taxi with you or other various animes or even nerderies, or want to talk about all the interesting stuff that is happening in your life, such as, I don't know, Leo Messi moving into your neck of the woods, perhaps. How would they do so?
Well, you can make a messy of things by getting a hold of me at Shadon1010 on Twitter, and you can talk to me about stuff there. Go nuts. Why not? Don't spoil anything about Odd Taxi. Don't fucking do that. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, that's the number 1 rule. That was Progress Wrestling's number 1 rule as well. Don't be a dick. And Jim Smallman would tell the live crowd that in the Electric Ballroom every night, and they would chant it along with him. Don't be a dick. Yeah. So if you want to follow me on Twitter and talk about anime like Odd Taxi, manga I'm reading such as Claymore, live action Asian cinema I have been watching such as The White Storm, directed by Benny Chan, which all of you should go watch blind right now. Read nothing about it. Just click play and watch it. At The Subtle Doctor on Twitter. No caps, no spaces. And you could support the show, of course, on Patreon, as we've discussed. $2, $3, $5 tiers get lots of extra and exclusive content and Discord access and fun times. But if you can't support us or don't want to support us that way, that's totally fine. You can give us a rating and review. Notice I didn't say rating or review. I said rating and review. Not just the stars, but the text on the Apple Podcast app. That's helps with discoverability tremendously. But also, you could follow us on YouTube. Click subscribe, click the bell, leave comments, help us defeat the almighty algorithm. And we're on Spotify, we're on Twitter, we're in other places.
Do you not feel deeply ironic, or maybe even deeply
yes,
like
I understand.
Awkward doing that.
Hypocritical.
I see you live in a society. Very interesting.
Yeah, I too live in this. Yes, absolutely. No, it's a dramatic irony. I would totally agree with you. Well, that's our show. Shadon, thank you for hanging out as always.
Yeah. No problem.
Chat, patrons, thank you for hanging out. Folks that listen in the future, hello, future people, and thank you for making us part of your time. He's been Shadon. I'm the Subtle Doctor. Until next week, when we're talking about Death Parade, embrace each other, everyone, to the ends of the universe.
Good night.
Bring back the brothers.